Colm, you mentioned the back page of the Times today and David Walsh's piece, which is here, and just wanted to read a couple of quotes from it. So the subheadline is, when rank and file pros are handed multi-million deals just to tee off, it's clear who golf's big winners are. It's not the LIV Tour, it's not fans or diminishing TV audiences. And he makes the point that he was watching the end of the Czech Masters last week and the importance to a player to get their win on tour and what it can mean to them with the significance of it, compared to watching Charles Schwartzel and Henrik Stenson with their victories recently on LIV Tour, is making the point that they were, quote, calm and understated. So much so, I wondered if their contracts with LIV meant that the prize money was offset against their signing on fees. The point here is, when golfers get multi-million-dollar contracts just to tee it up, we lose, and though enriched, they too lose as well. If we don't need a win, why would we want to watch them? Which I think is a very reasonable point, that for those who go to LIV and have signed the contracts, and because of the fact that it's an invitation field essentially, so you're not playing to stay as part of a tour card, in basically by teeing it up you're being very, very well paid, so it's less significant than if you were to win, like the players who were chasing a victory on the Czech, who were trying to make sure they had a tour card for 3 years, and maybe that money means a remarkable amount to them. Then maybe this sums up a certain amount of the hollowness about LIV Golf here.
Very much so. Obviously the essence of sport, it boils down to the very essence of sport, and that is competitiveness and jeopardy. There is no jeopardy in LIV Golf. You are guaranteed your money week after week. Now, obviously, I think the more players that join, and I think more players will join because of the money, more competitive element will probably come into it when they establish a more solid base. And I think that will happen, although obviously the PGA Tour, on foot of the meeting that took place, initiated by Tiger and Rory McIlroy last week, that's obviously going to lead to change, and it's going to be more pronounced, the tour, around the better players. So obviously that's an attraction in itself, and it is a little nudge towards the LIV Golf model. But it's hard to really fathom how, and that piece in the back page really, it does capture it, among a lot of others, and obviously a lot of other journalists have written this, but it does capture the essence of the absence of jeopardy. There must be a risk factor for every sports competitor that goes out there, that goes out into the arena or into the field, that losing must have some consequence. And I suppose it's on a par with the Super League last year, that there was no jeopardy for the top 6 English teams that were going to be there every year. Qualification didn't matter. Qualification or promotion, relegation, all of these things have to matter. You have to lose your tour card. You have to have that jeopardy or that threat of losing your tour card for the lower ranked players. Obviously, you have to, the rankings obviously qualify you for the bigger tournaments, the majors. Obviously, with the Tour Championship as it's and the FedEx Cup as it's currently constituted, there are consequences for not qualifying for all of this. Whereas with LIV, it's just a straight bat. You go, you pick up your check, you play in those teams with those awful names, and you leave, and that's basically it. And there's the absence of threat or jeopardy. Just I can't see how any spectators or even a TV audience would be engaged by this. Where is the hook for the audience for any of us? Well, it's a 3-day event over a weekend, but Sunday night golf is huge. People sitting in to watch the closing stages of a PGA Tour Championship on a Sunday night or a major. It's a captivated audience. Can you imagine getting around the screen to watch a LIV Golf finale like that, where there's really nothing at stake? I just can't see it. I think obviously it's a money factor. Clearly it's a money factor. Maybe it will evolve. I do think it will evolve in time, obviously, when they build that up. But as a model for the spectator to be engaged, for the TV audience to be engaged, it just isn't there. And sport in its very essence, I don't think it is.
Yeah, Gavin, I watched the first LIV Golf event, the one just outside London, flicked on YouTube just to see what it was going to be like. It didn't capture my attention, and for one reason. We talked about this during the week when all of these changes were being announced by the PGA Tour, and potentially you have to be locked in for 20 different tournaments next season, and they're even looking at shorter forms of golf. And you've got Tiger and Rory putting up virtual golf, which could potentially extend Tiger's career because he could stand in a stadium and play against a simulator, and all this was coming out at the one time. And I was thinking the one strongest thing that the European Tour and the PGA Tour have right now is actually tradition. This idea that you go out there, you play across 4 rounds, you play in these tournaments which have got extended history and are important because they've been part of the PGA Tour for so long. I think that prestige is actually the attract for golf fans who love their golf. I'm not even sure if these new formats and ideas are actually going to attract in new fans.
Nah, I mean, the theory is to grow the game. That's obviously nonsense. Like, I mean, no, I just echo what Colm says. I mean, it's about competition. I mean, great that the players make loads of money as a byproduct of their competition, but we're not tuning in really to see who picks up the biggest check. I mean, I don't have a whole lot of interest in the Tour Championship this weekend, I have to say. I generally like
Rory's in contention.
Watching the majors. No, I just echo all that's been said there. I mean, when people, what attracted you to LIV Golf, it reminds me of like, so Debbie, what first attracted you to the millionaire Paul Daniels? Like, I mean, it's clearly about the money, and the fact that the players are now just nakedly admitting it's about the money is actually a progress than this, disingenuous nonsense about growing the game and then trying to defend Saudi Arabia's human rights record, which is indefensible. I haven't read too much about the PGA Tour's changes, but it sounds like, from what you just said, Tiger Woods has basically just invented a form of golf that he can continue to play. Is that what's just happened?
That's one of them. So basically a whole load of information came out in the one day. I think it was either Tuesday or Wednesday. So the PGA Tour were looking at potentially having, they could maybe incorporate shotgun starts. They could maybe potentially go for shorter forms. And this is almost like a direct kickback to LIV. So it's like, if you guys find this entertaining, maybe we can provide this too. And also they want to guarantee that their players are available for more tournaments throughout the season. And that even caught John Ram out a little bit at Eastlake yesterday when he was questioned about it. He's like, I have to play 20 tournaments next year and I have to qualify for the Ryder Cup, so I'm going to be in Europe quite a bit, and I've only played 17 this year, so there's still a bit to be ironed out in that regard. But the virtual golf, you may well have seen the Twitter video which went up, which is in a very early concept stage, and I'm sure they've 18 months to get this right. They can probably make it a lot better, but the idea would be the golfers could go and play effectively a showdown inside a stadium. The stadium looked a lot like one of the NFL stadiums, where you can put a lot of graphics and augmented reality all over the place as well. And the idea would be Tiger Woods wouldn't have to climb the hills of Augusta National anymore. He could play the Masters in a stadium against a simulator, and it would all be nice and fancy and razzmatazz. And basically, you've got Rory McIlroy, Tiger Woods, two of the biggest stars of the game, who'd be behind this.
Cool. Well, I'd have to think more about it. Initially, I hate that idea. That is absolutely no attraction to me whatsoever. One thing, have they done anything for, the LIV Golf Tour has been packed out. There's obviously a few recognisable names that took crazy money. I then look down at the other names, and there's a whole load of names I've never seen in my life.
Like
and there's
Koepka's brother.
Yeah, and look, guys who are below the breadline on the European Tour and the PGA Tour, who have been paid a lot of money to be effectively meat in the room, for this, to justify this, calling itself a tour. Have the PGA done anything for those guys? Is there going to be a better trickle down of money? Because
they found some money down the back of the couch.
Yeah.
So there's more guaranteed money for the PGA Tour over the coming seasons.
Yeah.
Remarkable how when LIV were able to increase the pot, the PGA went, there's actually is a few quid.
Yeah.
And Phil Mixon see that as
in there, wasn't there some mention that there were private equity, the JP McManus and Dermot Desmonds of this world would be able to invest in a new look PGA Tour, which would increase the finances around it, but obviously they'd have to start paying tax. They would no longer under American law, they would have to start paying tax once they allowed private investors to come in and take a share in it. So that was also mooted at the meeting last week as well, in addition to what you say, the stadium golf, which is quite bizarre really. Maybe in America something like that will take off, and it will keep Tiger at the forefront. But private equity was one of the factors that was going to increase the money, and obviously there would be trickle down in that respect.
Colm, I guarantee you Phil Mickelson will make the point, if that comes to pass, and say the poorest 10% of players on the PGA Tour end up getting more cash into their pocket. He will claim that him going to LIV Golf has enabled this.
has justified it very much so. And there was a lot of that. I noticed some of the comments even from Lee Westwood during the week when the details, when the projections for the future of the PGA Tour come out. Lee Westwood was one of those who mentioned, well, they're following us. Essentially, they're mirroring us now and what we're doing. So there is a bit of that with the LIV golfers who have moved on, in that, well, we're justified in some way that they're actually following us now. So somewhere up the line, I do think there will be a conformity here. I think LIV will get stronger up to a point, but unless that competitiveness comes into it, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see any engagement in it. And how long do the Saudis hang around for something like this? Is it forever? I doubt it.
And also for the effect in the European Tour, if people want to check it out today, so Philip Quinn has got a piece in the Mail as well, talking about the fact that the European Tour is very much caught in the crosshairs here, because a lot of the top European players have been targeted and have now gone to LIV Golf, and their schedule may well have to move around. And even just from a purely Irish perspective, or to look at it through that prism, potentially Greg Norman could be bringing LIV Golf to Donald Trump's course in County Clare the week before the Irish Open would take place in 2 years' time. So maybe there's going to be a collision course directly between the European Tour and LIV Golf in that regard. We're looking at the GAA manager merry-go-round as well. There's a few pieces that are well worth checking out today. The Sun outlining very nicely on pages 38 and 39 in the paper today the managerial vacancies that are still there. The latest one that's been filled, Paddy Christie has gone to Gavin's home county of Longford. He's set to be ratified at next month's county board meeting, leaving the Tipperary management set up to go there. There's still a few to be filled, some high profile ones that haven't been quite filled yet, like Donegal and Monaghan. It's all outlined there. Also, we've got a piece today from Michael Clifford, which is on page 60 of the Mail on Sunday, who's looking, Colm, at the fact that being a pundit on the Sunday game is no bad thing if you want to get back into management. It's proved to be quite a useful shop window, particularly in this window for managerial appointments. Yeah, well, I suppose there's a couple of ways of looking at this, and I note Michael's piece here. I'm just looking at it. Were they pundits first or managers first? And they fall into two categories. I think the two centrally that I would really deem as predominantly pundits. Obviously, Colm O'Rourke was. He's been involved with the Sunday Game team for probably 30 years at this stage. He was certainly there as a player in 1991. So he has very much, in terms of intercounty, he's very much been pundit first. And obviously, at almost 65 years of age, this is his first intercounty senior management job. And also Kevin McStay has been with the Sunday Game a long, long time. Now, obviously, Kevin was involved with Mayo as a team trainer in 1995 and did go for the job after that. But he was essentially involved with clubs around Roscommon and indeed Mayo for much of his time. But predominantly we know the two of them as Sunday Game pundits, whereas the rest that Michael mentions, you could say they're managers, they're managers almost first really, and incidentally pundits after that. So I would classify them in two categories, but there has been quite a movement from the couch this year back onto the sideline. He mentions Tomás O'Shea here, who was obviously went last year to Offaly, having spent 4 or 5 years perhaps in the Sunday Game studio and in the commentary box. He went to Offaly and has now gone to the Kerry under-20s. So there has been quite a shift, but predominantly Colm O'Rourke and Kevin McStay are the two main ones, because they have been really central figures in the coverage over the last 2, and in Colm's case 3 decades. So Michael Clifford lists 10 here who you could all say is pretty much of course it's all accurate, it's all there. He mentions Eamon Cregan. Eamon Cregan was a very, very common hurling pundit back in the 1990s especially, and of course Ger Loughnane and Liam Sheely. But I would have classified them all as managers first and consequently pundits. So there probably is a distinction there. But certainly for O'Rourke and McStay to make that move, I think it's brave on both behalves. There's no guarantee for either for success. Kevin is obviously has a better chance with Mayo. Colm O'Rourke has taken on me the time when there's absolutely no guarantee of any progress really. So
It's a little bit of a shot in the dark for him, whereas obviously Mayo are a lot closer to the top and are likely Connacht winners at any stage over the 4 years that he will be there, to give him some platform, whereas I would very much doubt Meath will even win a provincial title in the time that Colm will be there, because of obviously Dublin's continuing dominance. So they're in contrast in some ways, but I do think Kevin McStay obviously would be better placed.
I want to ask both of you about Mick Foley's piece about Kevin McStay and Mayo in a second, but Gavin, did I see in the corner of my eye, was that you moving the newspaper, or was that you celebrating the fact that Paddy Christie is now the Longford boss?
I'll say moving the newspaper, given I'm an independent journalist here.
But happy with the appointment?
Yeah, I'm sure I am. Yeah, it's just like, I don't know. I mean, I don't follow Gaelic football very closely, I have to say, through work. But yeah, it looks good appointment by Longford, and this guy has got a very good track record.
There you go. He was just moving the newspaper, folks.
These jobs are really, really difficult to fill for certain counties. And you're mentioning Kevin McStay. You're about to talk to Kevin McStay about Kevin McStay and Michael Foley's piece in the Sunday Times. At that level, it's probably a lot easier to get a manager. And if you just look at the interest that was in the Mayo management job, 4 candidates, all stacked with really strong backroom teams, among them actually Paddy Christie, the new Longford manager, who was part of Declan Shaw's team. But if you look at the level of candidacy that was there for Mayo in terms of backrooms, really impressive, whereas a number of counties are really, really struggling to fill these vacancies, and there's pressure on officials even to get some people to pick up a phone and answer them, to reject them or to push them back in ways. That's even a challenge for some counties. There is a very, very small pool of good coaches, and these are difficult jobs, and I would certainly detect that vacancies at a certain level are becoming increasingly difficult to fill. There are still a number outstanding. I think Monaghan will be filled very, very soon. If not today, well then tomorrow I would imagine that appointment will be completed. But if you go to Wexford, you know, their manager has Shane Roach stepped down some weeks ago. If you look at Longford and Down last year, it took them until November to fill their vacancies, having both managers having vacated. By memory, certainly Paddy Talley quit last June, and it took until November at least for James McCartan for that vacancy to be filled. Now, obviously, Down and Longford have gone about their business much quicker this time, but other counties will be left struggling to fill those vacancies into September and October, I would think, because there isn't a huge pool out there to do them.
Yeah, Colm, I was just thinking when it comes to that, even when it goes to Longford, we had Billy O'Loughlin on with us on OTB AM before he left his position in Longford, and he was making that very point, that if you go into a county whereby, and even Wexford will be a similar case, where it's almost like the Leinster Championship feels like it's a rung way too high to try and get over. So therefore, you're hoping to get a win or a good draw in Leinster, but realistically, you're probably looking at the Tailteann if you're a Division 3 or Division 4 team. Even just from a motivation point of view for a manager coming in, that's a difficult ask from the outset.
It is, but the provincial championships will be a little bit more diminished next year, because they'll be run off even quicker than what they're being run off at present. They have to be condensed even more, so there'll be little gaps between that. I think it'll be week on week when the schedule appears. It'll be week on week almost, and maybe a 2-week break to the final before the Sam Maguire round robin and the Tailteann Cup round robin kicks in, and that's really where the action will be for at both levels. So I think there will be renewed focus next year for those teams on the Tailteann Cup. Obviously, league progress is a big thing for counties at that level and getting up the divisions there. But I do think there'll be renewed focus on the Tailteann Cup. I think Westmeath's win and the way they celebrated and the way they embraced it is a real pointer as to what will happen certainly in the short-term future around the Tailteann Cup. It's not going to be a repeat business. I don't think you get the same enthusiasm for it if Westmeath were to drop back down in a couple of years' time and go and win it. I don't think it would be the same. But for certain counties, I do think it is a genuine path now and a genuine North Star for them to go and pursue, because the provincial championships are really, really only a stepping stone now, much more so than they have been at any stage, and I think that will become quite apparent next year with the scheduling and the emphasis and the priority that the round robin in both Tailteann Cup and Sam Maguire will have.
Yeah, Westmeath, one of those teams now looking for a manager as of yesterday, with Jack Cooney stepping down for a new role with the GAA as well. Gavin, we want to have a look at Michael Foley's piece then. He's looking at Kevin McStay, the new management team, what they could potentially achieve. Page 12 of the Sunday Times today, it's "The New Messiah" is the headline we have here.
Yeah, reminds me of the line from Life of Brian, "He's not the Messiah," because I've followed a few of them in my time. Really, it's interesting stuff. I mean, first of all, I just found a line by Rob Murphy very funny when Mick makes the point that with such granular local coverage across nearly 2 months of this race to become Mayo manager, are the media also feeding the beast? And Rob says, "I think it helps keep it from spiralling out of control. People can't stop thinking about this. Therapists will tell you it's better to talk," which is a lovely little insight into the importance of Mayo football in the county of Mayo. And then what is touched on here, it's not really, it's a job I suppose McStay has, is to reconnect the team and the supporters, because maybe it was slightly patronising the way Mayo fans were talked about at times along in that journey under James Horn and then Stephen Rochford. And Holmes and Kennelly as well, just how loyal they were and how loud they were and what great supporters they were, and it seems to have really fractured in the aftermath of that defeat to Tyrone. I think there's a line in here about there was a sense that All-Ireland final in 2021 was being served up for them on a silver platter, and they missed it. And there seems to be, that there was a real kind of sourness after that. So I was just interested to see that. I always felt like people would talk about in those years when Mayo were building heartbreak upon heartbreak, like how tough it must be to be a Mayo fan. But honestly, I think it was better to be a Mayo fan than the fan of 30 other counties in the country. Like, the journey is really what it's about, and the journeys were always really epic. They make the point here, God, there's 15,000 in Ennis for a qualifier against Clare. So if McStay can get that going, I think Mayo could be a force to be reckoned with again. And it's interesting just looking, and Colm will have a much better insight into this than me, but just looking at the quality of his coaching ticket, he's got great coaches there, like Donny Buckley, Liam McHale, but he's got managers there, like Stephen Rochford is a manager, Shane Mulligan is a manager. So it's just like, he's almost like managing the managers, and he's just like, he's almost like this. McStay will be almost like a figurehead at the top of all this. McStay is a superb communicator. So from that point of view, I think he's a great choice for the role. Whether May have the squad or the players to compete next year or at any point under McStay's leadership, I don't know. I mean, I'd guess that they would, because the standard isn't what it was. But I'll defer to Colm on those questions, because he's much better placed to answer than me. But I really like McStay. I really hope it's successful for him, and really can't wait to see how it goes.
Yeah, Colm, in many ways, McStay is the figurehead of a huge management team here, and increasingly we saw the piece last weekend about Kerry's management team and the amount of experts that they brought in and what's required, and the stockpiling which is required in this Cold War at the very top of Gaelic football in particular. And it's true of hurling as well. When you look at the strength particularly of Limerick's backroom team, it now becomes much more than just a manager who picks a few selectors and goes out and trains the team. This is now, as we saw in this Mayo situation, you need an elite backroom team if you're going to compete.
Well, there's 5 mentioned on the ticket, and there's 5 been in the public domain for some time, and that's Kevin and Stephen Rochford, Liam McHale, Donny Buckley and Damien Mulligan. They're the 5, and they obviously bring a lot of gravitas and experience. Stephen Rochford and Donny Buckley were there in between 2016 and 2018, and really no Mayo manager went closer. Obviously John Mahon matched in 1996 the draw and replay against Meath, but Stephen Rochford in 2 years lost All-Ireland finals as a manager, as Mayo did, by a point to Dublin in the midst of Dublin's 6-in-a-row run. So that's how close he brought them. It fell away badly then in 2018, and it ended badly enough for Stephen at the end of 2018, just the way that his year extension. So for him to come back in 4 years later, to come back in and be willing to come back in, I think there's good dynamic there. I think Gavin mentions Kevin being a good communicator. He's all of that. He's a very, very good communicator. And he'll bring great positivity to Mayo, which I think was lacking in the last year. I think since it was John Gunnigan from the Mayo blog, GAA blog, mentioned it, that, and Gavin has referenced that since the All-Ireland final last year, the atmosphere has been quite toxic. It lifted briefly during the league, but it was back around the league final. That hammering by Kerry really hurt Mayo more than anyone probably thought, including themselves. And they struggled against Galway for a long time and they were always really just chasing it. They were always chasing it. Injuries haven't helped them. Obviously, to be without Tommy Conroy this year, flying inside forward, and Ryan O'Donoghue. So, few decisions for Kevin to make around key players, obviously, in the coming weeks and months. But all of those, that's micro. The macro is he's very, very positive, and he's already said in the interview he did with Sean Moran in the Irish Times, that Mayo will be relevant, and they will be with that inside forward line if they can get Cillian O'Connor, Ryan O'Donoghue, and Tommy Conroy back on the field together at the same time as they were in 2020 when they reached the All-Ireland final. I think that they will, they'll take a positive step forward. I'm sure that up to a level. They may still be behind Kerry, Dublin, and even Tyrone, even a renewed Tyrone, that just be tucked in behind them. But they have a strong chance again. I mean, that this year for sure a dip, but injuries and everything that really could go wrong for them did go wrong for them. But you mentioned the scale of the backroom teams, and that's obviously a constant now. I mean, Kevin has appointed a logistics manager, another inter-county manager, Sean Finnegan, his good friend, his former army colleague, who has been Kildare ladies football manager, having been Westmeath ladies football manager. He's the logistics manager for this team. And Liam Horan, a former colleague of mine, Irish Independent GAA correspondent, he's head of communications and strategy or something like that. So they're already involved. So that's you're up to 7 straight away. And when you go to kitmen, physios, masseurs, team doctors, performance analysis, statisticians, a lot of teams now will have at least 2 statisticians, possibly 4. Some would go up to even 4 for that. You're talking about a team of between 20 and 24 is probably average at this stage for a team at that level. I remember one time documenting Davy Fitzgerald's team in Clare, and it was probably up to 28. Now Davy has specific roles, which are minor roles for certain individuals within a team framework like that. But it can go up to 28 in certain cases. But generally 20 to 24, and that's management in its own right for someone like Kevin, and that's the element that he will manage, and obviously leave the coaches. And he has 4 very well recognised coaches there, and I'm quite sure he will delegate that to them and let them get on with it. And I'd say Stephen Rochford and Donny Buckley. You must remember, Donny Buckley, this is his 4th different Mayo management team to work with, which is quite incredible for a Kerryman. I mean, it's not only is it a great obsession for the people of Mayo, it's now become a great obsession for this particular Kerryman, because he spent the last 2 years in Monaghan, and now he's back over to Mayo for a 4th stint with a different manager.
Colm, I'll give you a first shout on the 2 former Sunday Game Now pundits in Colm O'Rourke and Joe Brolly, who are spread across 2 pages in the Sunday Independent on page 14 and 15 of the paper, both looking at potential changes to Gaelic football. And Central Council was meeting yesterday, and I believe their Rules Committee are going to often have a look at some ideas now at this stage. But Joe Brolly has firstly expanded upon his ideas from last week. So I just want to give listeners and viewers an idea of the 4 changes he's talking about here. The goalkeeper would not be allowed to take a pass from an outfield player. The penalty would be a free kick, so you can't go backwards to your goalkeeper. At adult level, the kick out must be kicked from the 13-metre line and must go beyond the 45. A penalty would be a 20-metre free kick against you. Once the ball has gone over the halfway line, it cannot then go back over the line in that attack. The penalty again will be a 20-metre free kick. And the same punishment for zonal defending will be prohibited inside the 40-metre exclusion zone. So the idea here under Joe Brolly would be fairly radical, basically cutting down ideas where the flow may well end up with a team trying to sit in possession and defend. And then similarly, Colm O'Rourke is perhaps a little bit less radical and talking about some ideas to try and just keep the game moving. So obviously this is going to become a bit of a talking point over the next while, Colm, and the 2 lads have had their say here today.
Yeah, so they've gone. It's not really a head-to-head debate, but they are debating the same theme and coming up with quite contradictory solutions. I would think, because whereas Colm just is adamant there should be a restriction on hand passes. And if you remember 3 years ago, there were efforts to introduce during the preliminary competitions, there were efforts to restrict the hand pass to 4. But strong lobbying by the GPA, the Gaelic Players Association, obviously were successful in knocking that out before the start of the league. So that has been experimented before. Obviously with rules, there's the theoretical side of it and there's the practical side of it. I remember during that more recent experimental phase, the advanced mark originally in the very, very early stages of it, and this was just trials through college games, and actually Colm references that in his piece, that his school, St. Patrick's Classical School team, were used as guinea pigs before they even tabled them as motions to change. The advanced mark was you must make the catch inside the 20-meter line, which would be the ideal scenario for the advanced mark, because obviously a lot of players will cheat in certain ways, and that the lateral pass will be kicked to someone in space, they'll catch it on the chest, free shot. So that side of it, that side of the advanced mark has not worked out, whereas David Clifford's magnificent catch in the All-Ireland final and mark from that, well, that was such a good catch, maybe it deserved a free shot. So the jury is very, very much out on the advanced mark. I think it's probably tilting towards its abolition at this stage, I would imagine, even though it has, it seems, encouraged kicking. But I was mentioning that in the trial during the college games, it became very quickly apparent to referees that they weren't able to adjudicate as to whether those kicks were inside the 20-meter line, and that's why it was abandoned. And I feel that while Joe's proposals here are very well thought out, he's clearly given a lot of thought to this, and that must be recognised at first. How will they play out in practice? Because he mentions the goalkeeper, the goalkeeper must kick the ball out from the 13-meter line, and it must go to the 45-meter line. Well, would that not encourage all of the opponents to get back into that zone where they think the kick is going to be? And that's going to make it even more congested. See, with the range that keepers have to kick to the sidelines and kick short, it does open up the pitch. Now, I know the consequences for that are a slow build-up and all of that, but you would see huge congestion in that area, especially with his proposal of the exclusion zone. So nobody can be hanging around in there either. So it's going to make it obviously in isolation. That could make it difficult. How would it be? The one thing the GAA would look at, and will always look at in terms of rules proposals, is okay at inter-county level, but how would they play out at club level? That's the real gauge of all of that. And they never want to deviate the rules or change the rules for either game, because that's suggesting then that there's a split between the two games, and that's something that they would really, really want to avoid. So having an exclusion zone policed by the two sideline officials, well, there's many a club game where there aren't two sideline officials.
Or there are people from the clubs involved, Colm, who may well be keeping the sideline. And good luck with them judging whether someone is standing in the right zone or not.
Are those people, Will, are they going to police an exclusion zone? They're barely going to get the sidelines right, which is their primary function. And that can sometimes be harder. If anyone who's ever done a sideline, it can be sometimes in the spur of the moment, no more than umpiring, be difficult actually to catch. It's not as straightforward when you're down there on the sideline as you might think. So having you must road test this at club level, and where I see it falling down straight away is manpower. You will not have the officials to police this. So while it might work, and it could work, I don't know, I'd love to see it play out in some way under a sustained trial period. The test is at club level, and I think the GAA will not want to split rules, have one new set of rules for intercounty and another for club, and that's where I see the issue here. But it's a worthwhile debate, because while the year was good, and certainly when the season got to Croke Park, the games were for the most part, were very entertaining. There are large spells of slow, ponderous build-up that disengages the crowd quite a bit, and that is the modern game, and mixed in with some brilliance. And I think the Armagh Galway game captured both sides brilliantly. There was a lot of slow, ponderous build-up because teams were able to get numbers back and all of that, but there was enough great football and exciting moments to really bring that to life, that game, and it really stands out as the game of the year this year. But that's really the way the game is gone, and I'm not so sure either proposal. Colm is suggesting hand passes. As I said, that was ditched that was ditched 3 years ago at this stage. So he's not suggesting tinkering at the rules at county level. It's not something I consider wise. So there's a little bit of a conservative approach crept in. Maybe that's since his appointment as the Meath manager.
Potentially. Gavin, from build up on a Gaelic Games pitch to build up to this big qualifier for the Republic of Ireland women's team, which has got quite a bit of coverage this Sunday. I was kind of expecting this more to kick into gear later in the week. Maybe that's partly because of Vera Pauw speaking on Friday morning, and therefore the Sundays have picked up on her quotes a little bit, her contract situation, some of the comments she's had about the European qualifiers' future as well. Is that why we've got as much coverage of the women's team today?
That, and also the fact that it's a huge game. I mean, if the men's team were playing a playoff for a playoff, which this game against Finland on Thursday effectively is, we would have this level of coverage and we wouldn't really bat an eyelid at it. So it's just a reflection of the team's growing importance to the country and the importance of the game itself. It's absolutely massive. I mean, Ireland have never been to
major playoff,
never been to a major finals before, and they can secure a playoff now. Like it's an unbelievably complex process. Like, I mean, it's more difficult to understand than a Kerry County Championship like this, qualifying for the playoff for the World Cup, and I still don't have it clear in my head, to be quite honest with you, so I won't get into it now.
If you have a look at Eamon Sweeney's piece on the back page of the Sunday Independent, he tries to break it down, and anything that takes an entire column just to explain the potential for the amount of teams who are involved, where teams are ranked at this point in second place, what may happen with playoffs into playoffs, you can see the complexity of trying to get to New Zealand from that. But in many ways the Irish equation is simple, though. Having got the great result in Finland previously, it's effectively win, and at least then you can worry about the permutations of the actual playoffs after that.
Yeah, beat Finland and they're guaranteed a playoff, which was the target. That was success. They were never going to catch Sweden at the top of the group. Sweden, superb team. I think they were world number one at the start of the group. Obviously not the best team in Europe anymore, as England have proven, and maybe France have proven as well, and Germany as well. But Ireland, this is the aim. They made a bit of a hames. They should have done better in the qualifying for the Euros that we just saw in England this summer. They made a bit of a hames of it toward the end, somehow losing to Ukraine like a terrible OG, and I didn't miss a penalty as well. So this is their chance to put it right, and they've been very, very good in this group so far. I mean, to beat Finland away was a superb result. To draw away to Sweden was an even better result. So they're in a really good position coming into this game. Finland had a horrendous Euros. They lost all their 3 games to the point where they've sacked their manager. So you could argue that they're not in a great place coming in, but there may be some kind of new manager effect. And Finland, although there may be mental scars from the Euros, they at least have the physical conditioning of having played it. One thing that makes me a little bit worried about for Ireland's point of view is the fact that the Women's Super League in England hasn't started yet. So this is a huge game, and it's happening in pre-season, which you would never see for the men's game. I remember last year, the triple header in Nations League games, Portugal, Azerbaijan and Serbia, and I remember one of the issues pinpointed when Ireland's performance dropped was the fact that the players had only really had 2 or 3 league games under their belt going into this. Few of the Irish players really do. I mean, the last competitive game they played was the Georgia qualifier, which they obviously won very easily because Georgia are a really poor team. So that's a bit of a concern, but Ireland have proven, I mean, they have genuinely world-class players in McCabe and Denise O'Sullivan. I think Heather Payne is on her way to that level. They've sold out Tallaght Stadium in about half an hour,
and it's properly sold out this time as well.
It is properly sold out, yeah. And official Ireland's interest in the women's team is now such that they've had to find a bigger room for all the VIPs and the and the hoi polloi going along to this game. So yeah, really excited about it, and hopefully they can get over the line. So a win will guarantee them a playoff, and don't need to worry about the game against Slovakia the following week. A draw will mean that they'll have to go and get something in Slovakia, which might be tricky, but they should back themselves.
Colm, we've been here before when it comes to contract situations, and Aidan Fitzmaurice is covering that today. We've also got, I think it's very, very heavily covered by Mark Gallagher across 2 pieces in the Irish Mail on Sunday today as well, that Vera Pauw is now getting to this position where it seems the Republic of Ireland team are in a really good place, particularly since the Australia friendly last year. They've had a good qualifier campaign, and her contract is up in the air. It only runs through to the World Cup of next year. She says it's no distraction, but you would think that this will probably be talked about quite a bit, particularly if Ireland were to get into this playoff over the next while.
Yeah, I just have Mark's piece in the Mail on Sunday open here. The FAI must powwow with Pauw to secure her future, and he makes a strong case to say that Pauw has engendered that spirit. The FAI should do everything it can right now to ensure she continues her good work, irrespective of whether this team reached their first major tournament or not. So he's suggesting even if they don't beat Finland or somehow don't make these playoffs. And actually, you mentioned the playoffs there. I read Eamon Sweeney's piece, and then I read it again to try and understand the playoff connotations. I also read Mark Gallagher's other piece in the Mail on Sunday to try and get a handle on it. And I really can't, because there's 9 European qualifiers, 3 go through, and then the other 3 play off. But there's other federations come into it at some stage too. So I think a graph this week by some of the nationals, some of the daily titles, maybe to put up a graph to see how it all works out, that might work best to try and follow it. But with the contract negotiations, obviously you'll never hear really what's going on in the background, and I'm quite sure there are talks. Vera Pauw, obviously she's not going to say we're in contract talks here, but I'm sure there has been some intimations, and if there's not, there should be going on in the background. It's not something that really, and I'd say I wouldn't think this would just leak out into the public just yet, unless there was a hitch in it, and then I think we'd know all about it, because one side or the other would obviously be lobbying. But I would imagine the focus being on this game, and it has got substantial coverage in the paper. Obviously, Eamon Sweeney has devoted his main piece as a scene setter, describing it. It's the biggest match in the history of Irish women's soccer. Well, every match that the Irish women's team seem to play these days is the biggest match, and they're only going to get bigger, especially if they qualify for playoffs to build up towards a potential World Cup final place. So it's an exciting time, and I know actually that how quickly Tala sold out, and obviously you would think, well, maybe a move to the Aviva, but Katie McCabe made the point during the week, and that's referenced in the pieces this week, that really they don't want to go to a half-empty Aviva. They think they get the crowd up to 24, 25, 30,000 maybe, but empty seats around the Aviva would take from the atmosphere who they feel really at home in Tala. But I think if they reach the World Cup finals, I think at that point, with the profile of that, and given what happened in the summer with the European Championships across the water, I think the profile of this game is really only soaring, as it is across all ladies team sports, because we see obviously a focus on Japan and the women's rugby team, and in the Sunday Independent there's a focus on the 20 plus GAA players, or ex-GAA players as some of them are, who are down playing AFLW. And there's Sean McGoldrick has a piece outlining them, and all of a sudden there's over 20 there, and they're all playing prominent roles. So right across the board, Nadine Doherty has a piece about keeping the foot on the gas, so to speak, in the Sunday Independent, about the huge gains that have been made in terms of profile of women's sports, and to keep the foot on the gas, to keep it going, that it's reached a point now where, and she mentioned this in the piece, that hashtags are no longer important. And I think that's a very good line, to think that people are actually taking these games now, and taking, say, next Thursday's game for what it is, a real chance to progress along the way to a major finals. And I think that it stands up on its own without any of the need for marketing or anything else. I think people will tune in to see how they get on.
Gavin, I know Nadine's piece is one you wanted to have a look at today as well.
A lot done, more to do is basically the tenor of it. I was interested, just from a specific football point of view, and Colm just referenced it, is the success of the tournament, this is the Euros during the summer, a turning point whereby hashtags and slogans and the promotion of women's sport can be phased out. The prize money for the Euros was doubled from 2017 to €16 million. A welcome increase indeed, but laughable in comparison to the €371 million for the men's European Championships, plus the €200 million guarantee to the clubs of the players' release of the tournament. So that's an enormous chasm. And I do kind of wonder, this is a broader question, and only one I pose slightly idly, is whether women's football will be better with its own governing body to focus just on that sport, rather than relying on percentages of the income primarily from the men's game.
You're being slightly radical here at the time when everyone else is trying to integrate into the one umbrella. Yeah,
well, I was going to ask you, Colm, you're probably well placed to talk about this, but obviously the LGFA are separate to the GAA. Like, has that been? Do you think has that been a success for them?
It probably has, but I think the time has reached now, Gavin, for mergers between between all three bodies. That's obviously a priority now, even though it's the trail has gone cold over the last 6 months since all the respective congresses signed up to mergers. But I think at this stage, they would be better. I think equality is so prevalent now, and it's such an acceptance of it, that I think the LGFA and Camogie associations would be a very, very good fit into what I would feel now is a very willing GAA to embrace all of this. And I think around venues, fixtures, financing, you look at the disparity between LGFA players in terms of mileage and what the GAA players get. You see that disparity of mileage. Now, obviously, there's commercial reasons as much as anything, is that the LGFA on their own do not generate enough to be able to support their players, whereas with crowds and sponsorships and everything like that, well, the GAA can. And they can provide 65 cents per mile for their players, where it's much, much less, and in some cases not at all, for the LGFA, some of the LGFA and Camogie players. So there is disparity there. And I think with mergers, you would see a vast improvement. You could see in the disimprovement for the GAA players, because obviously the pot is finite. So you could see you could see mileage rates for players lowered, whereas obviously the Camogie and ladies footballers, it would increase to parity at that point. So I think there's lots of reasons why the LGFA for the next 20 years and the Camogie Association would be better off at this point.
Yeah, the clock up against us somewhat. Just want to pick out a few other stories that we're not going to get a chance to talk about. I think are probably worth your time this afternoon. In the athletics, you got Shane McGrath, page 63 of the Irish Mail on Sunday. Something we talked about a lot with Cathal Dennehy across the week. The importance of funding some of the Irish athletics coaches who are doing it effectively for free at the moment, and in some cases they had to pay to go to Munich to be with their athletes last week. He also speaks to Mark English on page 62, which is just beside that piece. And Mark English talking about the fact that he feels he's a stronger athlete now than he was when he won his first European bronze back in 2014. Neil O'Riordan has been speaking to Ciara McGeehan on the back of her European silver medal and the build up to the Worlds next year, as well as Paris 2024. And it's interesting that Ciara McGeehan and Mark English get a lot of coverage this week, because it was something that was discussed by Cliona and by Kieran last week with Joe, that actually there probably wasn't a huge amount of coverage on the two Irish athletes that won medals. And also I'd pick out as well, Kevin Burns got a good piece in The Sun today on page 32. He's interviewed Russ Amber, who is Alexander Usyk's cup man, and they talk about the fight. They talk about Alexander Usyk being a remarkable cruiserweight, now a remarkable heavyweight, but also there's great detail in there about what the Usyk camp thought about Anthony Joshua getting on the microphone after the fight in Jeddah. And the strong feeling is that the Usyk camp didn't really mind, and it seems that Alexander Usyk actually felt that Anthony Joshua was complimenting him as opposed to stealing the moment last Saturday evening. So they're very interesting pieces. Colm, my thanks for joining us via Skype.
Thank you, Will.
And Gavin Cooney as well. It's been a great chat over the last while. Plenty to look at in the papers today.